Hi everyone, and welcome to my talk at the Virtual Jane Austen Conference 2025. I'm so excited to be here again presenting at this conference. It's honestly one of my most favorite conferences that I present at. I really enjoy getting to see all of the different talks and conversations surrounding Jane Austen, and I'm always so happy to come back again every year. My name is Tiffany. I am a PhD student studying English literature at Northeastern University. I focus on people of color in 18th and 19th century British literature, as well as contemporary historical fiction that takes place in the 18th and 19th century. My talk today is The Sublime and the Beautiful, exploring Edmund Burke's aesthetic theory in Emma 2020. Autumn de Wilde's 2020 adaptation of Emma reimagines Jane Austen's beloved novel by bringing the work to light through visual choices that highlight the beautiful and the sublime. At the center of the story is Emma Woodhouse, a wealthy, self-assured young woman who interferes in the romantic lives of those around her under the guise of benevolence. While her matchmaking appears harmless at first, it ultimately reveals the emotional risk and power dynamics that accompany even well-intended meddling. This presentation explores how de Wilde uses visual aesthetics, particularly those aligned with Edmund Burke's theory of the sublime and the beautiful, to emphasize the shifting emotional undercurrents that structure Emma's development and the film's narrative arc. In A Philosophical Enquiry into the origin of our ideas of the sublime and the beautiful, Burke defines the beautiful as, quote, quality or those qualities in bodies by which they cause love or passion of something, while the sublime, a concept that was attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Longinus that Burke later builds upon, excites, quote, ideas of pain and danger, which, quote, operates in a manner analogous to terror. These two aesthetic modes are not simply opposed in Burke's framework. They exist in tension, often interdependent in their effects. The film, at first glance, leans heavily into Burke's category of the beautiful, with the pastel color palette, symmetrical compositions, and meticulous costuming reinforcing refinement and control. However, de Wilde strategically disrupts this by introducing moments of the sublime, most notably the nosebleed scene. This part of the film expresses emotional intensity. This presentation will explore how Emma 2020, analyzed through Burke's theory of aesthetics, uses the transitions between beauty and sublimity to evoke a shifting emotional response. Burke describes as a means of strengthening the narrative and the visualization of the film. I will break down 3 scenes within the film, one that showcases the beautiful, one the sublime, and the final scene will show the transition from the beautiful to the sublime. Through this analysis, I aim to show how de Wilde mobilizes Burke's categories not just for visual pleasure, but to structure the viewer's emotional journey alongside Emma's own. Doing so, Emma becomes not only a period romance, but also a meditation on the power of aesthetics form to mirror interior transformation. The film itself provides so many visually stunning moments that help bring the story to life. From the costumes to the set designs and the use of color, there are many instances of the beautiful represented throughout. Deciding on a scene alone proved challenging, as there are many scenes which one could isolate to further discuss their interpretations of the beautiful. Many moments seem purposely crafted to explore aesthetic ideals. One that stood out particularly striking comes when Emma and Harriet and other characters are viewing paintings. Comment on what beauty fills the room and how they feel so lucky to see these pieces in England. We have multiple shots of Harriet and Emma walking around admiring the pieces, capturing their sense of awe, curiosity, and quiet admiration. Their presence feels reminiscent of the works of art, and they fit within the aesthetics of the room through their dress and composure. When thinking about beauty, the interplay of art becomes a great representation of how to define it. Additionally, it invites the viewer to reflect on how art defines and communicates beauty across time, becoming something that feels timeless in many ways. These shots center Emma and Harriet among the large pieces of artwork behind them, also playing into the proportions of symmetry, which further enhance the aesthetic. The inclusion of art within art becomes a compelling way to explore how beauty functions both visually and emotionally within the scene. The beautiful itself cannot be defined in simplified terms because many different components make up our understanding of the aesthetics behind it and therefore enrich the definition of the concept. Aesthetics become a key word because one could argue that the entire film is beautiful, but when breaking down the why and the how of the beauty that exists, it also attaches to our emotional perception of how we experience beauty. As Burke writes, quote, "We ought therefore to consider attentively in what manner those sensible qualities are disposed in such things as by experience we find beautiful, or which excite us in the passion of love and some correspondent affection." Here, Burke speaks about the definition of beauty, which becomes something he aims to uncover through his analysis throughout this book, showcasing how the physical holds levels of beauty, but ultimately there needs to exist more, the beautiful, which causes an emotional response. In this scene, beauty is not only located in the painted canvases, but in the characters' reactions and interactions to them. While we see others also admiring the pieces, the scene really wants the viewer to pay attention to Harriet and Emma. They have an expression of wonder, which also shows how as humans we orient ourselves towards beauty. The choice of the colors they wear in this scene help amplify those feelings of beauty since they each have one color that stands out, pink for Emma and blue for Harriet. This shows different intentional details in the film, which allows us to dissect the beauty coming from so many parts of the scene. Burke looks at the beautiful through a philosophical lens, which understands the human condition and looks beyond the physicality of beauty. Beauty is more than something physical. It also evokes a deep spiritual emotional reaction. His philosophical lens encourages us to understand beauty not only as surface appearance, but as a reflection of the human condition. Our capacity to feel pleasure, love, awe, and even vulnerability when confronted with the beautiful. The sublime appears as a way to contrast the plethora of beautiful moments within the film. Both impact one another and help define each other. Sublimity happens when emotions are heightened. One example comes during the wintertime scene as the film divides itself into 4 seasons. All those who attend the Christmas party are preparing to depart in their carriages as the snow falls down and the darkness fills the air. The setting already feels sublime with the grandiose nature surrounding them. Emma must go home in the carriage of Mr. Elton. She agrees and takes it upon herself to tell him about Harriet, furthering her pursuit to matchmake the both of them. However, Mr. Elton confesses his love of Emma, which shocks her, and she learns that he ultimately only spent time with the two of them in hopes of getting closer to Emma. This whole scene is filled with immense intensity and becomes a way that the romantic can also sometimes feel sublime. While Emma remains composed within the scene, trying to have a kind expression on her face, even though it feels awkward, she still maintains that demeanor that becomes very pivotal to her character. While Mr. Elton has a creepy smile on his face, the audience knows he has something to unveil while Emma remains oblivious. The audience expresses this discomfort, waiting in anticipation for what will happen next. His expression feels innately sublime, and with the weather around them, this whole scene perfectly highlights the way that emotions begin to shift so quickly, not just for Emma, but also for the audience. The sublime evokes beauty from the way it can also kindle these emotions to not just those experiencing it within the film, but the audience too. Sublime exists to describe how individuals experience uncertainty or terror that breaks patterns and forces something unsettling to occur. Burke writes, quote, "Having considered terror as producing an unnatural tension and certain violent emotions of the nerves, it easily follows from what we have just said, that whatever is fitted to produce such a tension must be productive of a passion similar to terror, and consequently must be a source of the sublime, though it should have no idea of danger connected with it." This suggests that the sublime has both an external and internal component. The external that manifests in the physical reaction of the body, and the internal psychological response that mimics the effects of terror. The sublime elicits this fear, which, as Burke explains, does not need to come from real physical danger, but the feelings that are evoked from it. In other words, the sublime could be something completely safe that just causes the person to feel this sense of fear or terror. It may be an atmosphere, a silence, or even an awkward social moment that triggers this sensation. The key lies in our perception that can prevent the mind from logically processing the situation as it unfolds. When connecting to this particular scene, the fear in the carriage comes from this place of this emotional terror that something will go wrong, something that should not occur. The boundaries begin to break. The stillness, the isolation of the characters within a confined space, and the unspoken tension all contribute to the sublime unease. The audience feels Emma's tension, which aligns with Burke's description as the scene unfolds, since the silence builds that anxiety of what will happen next. This kind of cinematic moment, where visual restraint replaces action, mirrors Burke's conception of the sublime as rooted in anticipation and the unknown, not the overtly grotesque or violent. The beautiful and the sublime are distinct with their own definitions that Burke has laid out. However, that does not mean that they will always fall into just one of the two. There are things that could appear beautiful but then turn sublime, depending on the circumstances it goes through, and vice versa. The beautiful can become sublime just as the sublime can transform into the beautiful. In Emma, several scenes clearly evoke either the beautiful or the sublime, but one moment in particular exemplifies this fluid movement between the two, the nosebleed scene. It is, in my opinion, the film's most iconic and most unexpected, affecting moment. Emma believes Mr. Knightley loves Harriet, so when he appears during her walk, she avoids speaking to him for fear of confirming it, despite now realizing that she loves him. The two of them speak with hesitancy, but the audience can feel the emotional undercurrent building just beneath the surface, heightening the tensions and preparing for a sudden, sublime disruption that follows. The scene begins with restraint and composure as both of them try to remain proper. The landscape itself captures the beauty of the countryside, with them beginning in a more open space before eventually walking underneath a tree which encloses them as the scene builds. This starts off as a hallmark of the beautiful before it shifts into something more intense and bodily. Emma's nosebleed comes as she passionately yells at Mr. Bingley, accusing him of being in love with Harriet, which he assures her is untrue. This comes at the most perfectly imperfect time, since it breaks what is expected. The moment introduces a visceral, absurd rupture that transforms the scene into a sublime experience. This mixture of awkwardness, physical and emotional distress destabilizes the beautiful atmosphere and leads to the scene of overwhelm that everyone, including the viewer, experiences. This collision between the two perfectly embodies Burke's notion that the sublime arises in these expected yet unexpected ways. He writes on this efficient cause of the sublime and the beautiful to uncover how these things occur, but he also recognizes that this answer remains still unknown. Burke writes, quote, "So that when I speak of cause, and efficient cause, I only mean certain affections of the mind that cause certain changes in the body, or certain powers and properties in bodies that work a change in the mind." This definition positions the sublime as something that arises between the cornerstone of the body and the mind, where the emotional meets the physical. The origin of the sublime does not occur from one single cause, but rather this interaction between the external and the internal that causes this type of response. This scene showcases how the sublime exists through the emotional and physical. This becomes interesting when thinking about aesthetics, since, as mentioned previously, this meeting point becomes an interesting place to exist within and showcases the complexity of how these categories manifest. While Emma has the nosebleed, which exemplifies the physical sublime, another important part occurs during this moment that evokes the emotional sublime. because this moment is the climax of the story, where Emma and Mr. Knightley finally share their feelings, having the nosebleed showcase how love itself can be sublime. When Burke discusses how the sublime can mimic real-life danger, this showcases how people can experience this feeling and what could be seen as a flight or fight response. When one confesses their true feelings to the person they love with no indication that they feel the same way, that feels truly sublime. The event embodies Burke's ideas that sublime responses may originate from psychological affections that produce physical consequences. Emma's distress translates into a bodily rupture. The nosebleed becomes a physical manifestation of this emotional fear and forces our character to confront those feelings. It is a moment where vulnerability and anxiety culminate in an involuntary bodily occurrence, blurring the line between interior and exterior experiences as felt through this declaration. Burke's notion of the efficient cause perfectly encapsulates what he describes as the unknown reason. One could speculate that as humans, these responses are naturally occurring and involuntary. Therefore, the nosebleed reflects this aspect, where the inability to control or stop it from occurring reflects the human condition of the sublimity of love. This scene demonstrates that the sublime does not require grandeur or terror in the traditional sense. It can emerge from the fragile, uncontrollable expressions of emotional truth. Autumn de Wilde crafts a visually stunning and emotional story that brings Austen's world to life on screen by utilizing the concept that Burke has laid out in his theory on the beautiful and the sublime. Through her deliberate aesthetic choices, de Wilde renders the viewers not merely as a passive observer, but as an active participant in this emotional evolution that translates into the beautiful and the sublime. The film's beauty, expressed in its pastel color palette, symmetrical arrangements, and vivid costumes, provide a sense of comfort and ease to the viewer as they experience something new that feels familiar and striking. Those moments of calm are then punctured with those interruptions of the sublime, where that emotional intensity disturbs the polished moments, allowing for the discomfort of these scenes to come to life in a new way, playing into the vulnerability experienced by these characters. Whether it is the wintry discomfort of Mr. Elton's carriage confession or the jarring nosebleed Emma experiences during the confession by Mr. Knightley, these climactic romantic moments reveal the way our mind and bodies take these moments as sublime, and the way this becomes a universal sentiment. By doing this, de Wilde illuminates Burke's claims that the sublime originates from the collision between the internal effect and the external stimuli, between the unseen and the bodily. What emerges becomes a way to look at the aesthetic experience itself. How the beautiful, the sublime are not just visual categories, but conditions that shape human emotions and encounters. The film's ultimate message becomes a look at how love and self-discovery are not linear. They move in many ways, and through this, one experiences sublimity or beauty. Emma transcends being a period romance, but rather can be seen as a philosophical inquiry into the exploration of how aesthetics shape individuals and impact what we define as existence. Thank you everyone so much for coming to my talk. Please feel free to write in the comments your thoughts and ideas on this. If you have anything that you would love to share, I would definitely like to hear it. I will also be linking my website, which has this particular conversation with my works cited, so you can also look at that, as well as other research that I've done if you're interested in getting to know more about the work that I do. Thank you again so much for watching. Bye.